Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to Beer Blather 254, Chronicle of a Firestorm Foretold. Or maybe we should have called it Chronicle of a Clusterfuck Foretold. In either case, it's the same thing. You know us. We hate to be right. Everything we said about the Malibu fire in 2018 stands. A delusional policy catering to crazy environmentalists and funneling funds to political allies in NGOs that act as cash cows for Democrats could only result in the fiery inferno that we have been witnessing this week. 200 years of land and water management down the drain. Save water in wet seasons to keep fields irrigated in drought seasons? Nah. We need to save the smelt. Restore nature and give the indigenous tribes an occasion to return to the Stone Age. Keep reservoirs for emergencies, firefighting, and groundkeeps? Hell no. Clear the underbrush to limit the scope and severity of forest fires? Nope, that is a crime. It's a crime against nature. And do not get me started on controlled burns. We all saw this coming. From the common man with two active neurons to the insurance company's underwriters who saw the fire insurance as an uninsurable risk at the rates arbitrarily imposed by the corporative state and got out of Dodge. Some a year ago. Now comes part two. Don't miss it, to a theater near you, as it always does. There will be a rain season that will follow on land exposed by the fires. The countdown to mudslides has just begun. Look for the surprised look on the faces of DEI hires when they arrive. Socialist follies come with a price tag. All working Americans have to pay so that an idiot in charge of water management with a salary twice that of the President of the United States can empty reservoirs on the eve of the Santa Ana winds. We all know how these policies would end. It is a chronicle of a clusterfuck foretold. And it was politicized the moment these absurd policies were set in place. Don't pay attention to Newsom and everybody pointing fingers at little green men for Mars. They are responsible and they know it. And when they beg you not to politicize these in this moment we have such a tragedy going on, remember they politicized it when they set aside science and good practice and 200 years of experience in order to favor their political allies. California is a failed state. And this is Sol Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from my golden cage in Florida with my good friend Thomas Victor, the master man. We're going to have to say something about that because people don't seem to realize it. From Californication, the failed state of California, where the governor goes around pointing fingers to blame everybody but himself for his own delusional policies since he came to power. And this is, of course, Beard Blather, which brings me to the mask. As many of you know and will remember, and many of you seem not to get, and hence some comments on these videos. Thomas had a trimmer mishap, an equipment failure. Now, when Janet Jackson has an equipment failure, she shows her tits. When Thomas Victor, or myself for that matter, because it's been known to happen, has a trimmer failure, we kind of like shave a ridiculous pattern off of our beard, and we need to shave to make it even. And Thomas has decided that the world should not know what his face looks without a beard. and he is in his right to do so. And the mask has nothing to do with viruses. Now, apparently, we have a hair virus. We have the bird flu, the hair flu, the chicken flu, the ACHA, because they're desperately trying to create some kind of bullshit, but it's not going to happen. So, none of that, my friends. You can relax. Thomas has not gone to the dark side on the mask issue. He's just making sure that his face will remain covered until his beard meets his approval. Right?
Yeah, I accidentally shaved off half my beard, and there's no way I was in public with half a beard, so I had to shave off the other half. And then I decided, since I'd had a beard since I was 18 years old, um, I'm going to wait till the beard has grown back in before I take this thing off. So, end of story.
Yep, I must say that I fully understand your position. I've had a beard since I was 19 or 20. And some people, girlfriends, wives have told me at different times, but I want to see your face. And my answer is, this is my face.
Well, also, you don't want to see my face. That's why I grow a beard. It's like people used to tell me, shave off your beard to look younger. It's like, well, I won't. I'll just
Why would I?
I'll just look uglier. So,
I usually have a beard because I am so amazingly beautiful without it that I blind people, and they go into paroxysms and they all want to kiss me. And I said, no, wait a second, we need some defensive shield here.
well, I never understood people who told other people how to look, how to cut their hair, how to dress, whatever. It's like, did I ask you about your opinion on my beard? Like, okay, Georgia Maloney. I thought Georgia Maloney looked better with her previous hairstyle, but I certainly wouldn't tell her that. I wouldn't like bring it up unless she asked me. If she said, "Which do you like better, my previous hairstyle or this one?" and I'd say, "Well,
No, 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 no. The correct answer is both. You look absolutely smashing with both styles. A little diplomacy goes a long way with women.
yeah," but it's sometimes they are looking for the truth. Um,
No, no.
people always volunteered their opinions without me asking. I never asked people, do these pants make my ass look big? You know, I never do that. I've never once asked anyone in my life how I should look, and yet they tell me, and you know, um,
Yeah. No, but we are different birds. With women, I have come to learn at this more advanced age that the one thing they never want to hear when it comes to looks is the truth. Not ever. I haven't met one yet. So if you cannot bring yourself to say you look smashing, my dear, then you should fall back on some tried and true diplomatic statement that everybody knows is a cop out, including the recipient, uh, but that will let you walk out there with some dignity.
well, if she's going to get angry at me for telling the truth after she asked for the truth, then
Yes.
she's not somebody I want in my life. So, besides, there's no women. I've never had a woman in my life ask me, you know, about how she should. I dated a woman for 5 years, and when I first met her, she had like majorly long hair, and throughout our 5 year relationship, it got shorter and shorter and shorter. And by the end, it was sort of like in the 1950s, there was an actress named. She was in the Belmondo movie Breathless. She was an American actress, Jean something or other. But she had like that 1950s. It was almost like a man's haircut. but it looks good.
Yeah.
And this was her hair. I wasn't going to tell her, I wish you'd grow your hair out. It didn't matter to me because it was her hair. I mean, who was I to tell her? And she never asked. Should I, when she'd come home, after getting her hair trimmed again, she'd say, does it look okay? And when somebody says, does it look okay? That's not the same as, do these pants make my ass look fat or whatever? And, I always told her, yeah, it looks fine. And the truth was her hair wasn't a big deal compared to everything else. So I don't know. It's just, it's probably a part of it is in California where, people volunteer stuff all the time. And then if you say, hey, who asked you? Then they get all, well, I just thought you'd like to know. And it's like, well, I mean, I didn't ask you. Like, how about you not like just suddenly raise your hand and say, by the way, but this is California.
Yep. Everybody in California, everybody is an arbiter elegantorum. Everybody has an opinion on the looks of everybody else.
And okay, I mean, it's supposed to be the land of beautiful people, but it's a land of surgically enhanced, like, monstrosities. I don't know. It's and now they're eating each other alive. When these fires first started, they were presenting a united front, and now the LA fire department chief is, since she got so much flack, she's blaming it all on the mayor and the governor. So
she was sacked.
It's unclear. I looked it up before we went on the air, and it's unclear if she's fired or not. She's in limbo, and I think they're afraid of firing her because she's lesbian. Her battle cry was "Lesbians get it done," and
did she ever clarify what exactly was it that lesbians get done?
I don't know, and I don't care. I mean, lesbianism is not. It's not a factor in fighting fires.
No, it's neither a qualifier nor a disqualifier, as far as I know.
Well, it has nothing to do with anything. And okay, somebody leaked Gavin Newsom whining to the White House that they had to start cracking down on all this criticism as disinformation because it was making his life hard. And you've probably heard that Zuckerberg has ditched his fact checkers, and he's announced a community note system like Musk is using. And
yes, handled from Texas, I might add.
Yep, and Californians took time out from their shock at losing everything they own to get hysterical over that. And I actually heard somebody, it was Jimmy Kimmel, I believe. He said we have to say goodbye to free speech. And it's like, wait a minute. They just announced they're no longer going to censor speech, and to you that means the end of free speech.
For these people, free speech is the ability to muzzle the other. Is the freedom to make you shut up.
It's
something that we can see in Europe today. This past commissioner in the European Union, Thierry something or other, an asshole of the first order, was telling people how the European Union needs to censor X and other media in order to salvage democracy.
Yeah,
now think about that for a second. We need a ministry of propaganda to salvage democracy. We need censorship to salvage democracy. I don't know what the fuck he calls democracy, but it ain't the same thing I do.
Well, we need censorship to salvage free speech. I mean,
yes.
This is gotten to the point. These people are they lack such self-awareness that they're actually they've become beyond Orwellian. You
Yeah.
know,
By the way, that was Thierry Breton.
what?
Just remember Thierry Breton. That
Oh,
was,
okay. So
and I have another one for later.
I forgot what I was saying. Why don't you use
They have such lack of self awareness. You were saying
yeah,
that.
I mean it's beyond ridiculous when you're calling on censorship in order to save free speech, and you believe it as you're saying it because your brain is no longer functional. And it takes a catastrophe and for all the people who've lost their homes, the catastrophe is just beginning. The mayor promised that they were going to sweep aside red tape, and as of yet, the cities have been unable to declare curfews because they can't get through the paperwork. This is what they've announced. And in any normal part of the country, the mayor or the sheriff comes out and he says, as of this moment, there's a curfew. And that's how they declare a curfew. In California, you have to spend a week filling out paperwork. And um,
In the meantime, the South American gangs of illegals are looting the living crap out of anything that the fire left, and they're coming down like swarms of mosquitoes, and there is no police because, of course, we needed to reduce police presence, and nobody thought of calling the National Guard to patrol the area to make sure that looters didn't make this into a looting holiday, and they haven't even declared a state, of not of siege, but you just said it. Now I'm the one with the brain fart. Um, and like you said, and they're pushing paper like crazy.
well, they activated the National Guard so that the Guard could carry out what they call non-emergency activities, which means loading boxes. So they don't want to call the Guard they don't want to arm the Guard. They did this during the riots in 1992. The Marines were activated and they came to Los Angeles, and Tom Bradley insisted that their rifles not have bullets. And the governor, Pete something or other, I forgot his last name. He took Bradley into a room, and when they came out, Bradley's face was strangely shiny. And my brother and I said that, the governor was sitting in there going, what in the world are you thinking? How, so the Marines got ammunition because, as the governor rightly pointed out, what happens when the Marines say, drop that pile of gunk you've stolen from somebody, and they say, what are you going to do about it? Because they brought in the Marines, and then the mayor announced, but don't worry, they won't have ammunition. I mean, so
it's insane, isn't it?
They have activated the National Guard, but they're not allowing them to patrol or bring their weapons. They're shifting boxes from point A to point B, and whatever non-emergency response means, collecting donated socks and I mean
handing out the pens. By the way, wasn't
state
Wilson
what
that you were talking about? Wasn't it Pete Wilson that you were talking about?
Pete Wilson, yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I mean the state has reached this cartoonish level of incredible incompetence, and nobody deserves to have their houses burned down, but the majority of people, I mean, a lot of the same people who just lost everything they ever owned, they're on social media as we speak, bitching about Jack Smith resigning, bitching about Zuckerberg no longer censoring free speech. You know, Zuckerberg went on Joe Rogan and explained that he had alphabet agencies coming after him and making threats, and the both the Obama and the Biden administration were threatening to destroy his business using the IRS unless he played ball with them. And you know, all he had to do at that point was to start recording these conversations and then go public with them, and you know, everybody would have known, and they wouldn't have dared go after him at that point. But at least now he's ditched. He used third party fact checking organizations. There's at least 70 that exist, and they're all leftist. Every single one has a leftist bias. So all these people who've lost everything, they're still insane political activists. They're still vicious, hate-filled, strangely retarded, intransigent, weirdos who just won't give up and who insist on propagating the very disinformation that they themselves claim they're against. And you can feel bad for them up to a point, and then you have to point out, look, you voted for all this and you're still pushing it. So everything you're pushing is going to make sure that you're never going to be able to recreate the life you had before these firestorms. And you don't understand that. You're gonna rush to support Newsom when the time comes. Right now you're angry, but when the time comes, you're going to rush to support him. You're going to surround him and hug him and make up another chant. When he was facing recall, everywhere he went, his supporters would chant, zippity doo, Gavin Newsom, we love you. That
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, that was
Zippity doo. They're 4-year-olds, for crying out loud.
Also, they love him. Gavin Newsom is a uniquely unlovable individual. Like you can't love him. There's nothing there to love. He's a machine, and he's a dumb machine. But Californians love him, and look what he's done to them. I don't know. The mind boggles, but this is California, so you just roll with the punches.
Absolutely unbelievable. I'm checking, by the way, a little problem that we have in the transmission on the what you would call it,
Railroad track
website.
What?
On the Odyssey, we have a little bit of a problem with the Odyssey transmission, which hopefully I just reset, and we're going to find out in a moment and see if that is true. Meantime, we are live on all the others. So I was curious because I saw some things on the what you would call it,
chat,
on the chat that were kind of weird. And I think what happened, and this is where, unlike a Democrat, I own up to my fuck ups. I think what I did in Odyssey is I scheduled it for a half an hour later. So we started on the Twitter timelines and on YouTube, but the other one was firmly in the blank. So hopefully this is done, and when we go on demand, it's going to be fixed entirely. So my apologies to those who will be coming in a little bit later. But, we still have 2.5 hours to go, so that's fine. Holy cannoli. One would think that by now I wouldn't be making these mistakes, don't you think?
Well, it's just the first sign of Alzheimer's. Nothing to worry about.
No, no, no. Let me see. It's back active. So let me see this thing. By the way, it's not the first sign of Alzheimer's. Is the last sign of brain melt. I've been having this kind of shit since I was in my 20s. Let's see what happens here. Oh, there we are. I can see the chat, but I cannot start the video. I don't know. We're gonna have to just do our thing, and hopefully, okay. Oh, this is great. Now the quote meet at December 1st is active. Holy crap! Why? Why would that be?
Do you want to go off the air and fix it, and I'll just wing it?
No, 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 no. Let's keep talking, and we'll fix it on demand anyway. So no big deal there. So anyway, we were talking about our good friend Newsom, but I got kind of like stuck on this Disney-like political chanting. It, there is a thing called infantilism,
Mm-hmm.
which Marxists accuse everybody else of falling into infantilism, which is trying to hurry the revolution before the objective conditions are met or some shit like that. But this takes infantilism into a whole new freaking level, doesn't it?
Well, leftism is all about infantilism. I mean, think about the whole notion that the entire world has to change its behavior because you feel uncomfortable. Okay, you feel uncomfortable or you feel unsafe, and you hear leftist women, especially Californians, say that all the time. I feel unsafe, and it's like, I don't care. I mean, I don't care. Go feel unsafe. I don't care. It's the Californians. They I'll never forget. There was this terrible story. There was a crazy woman. She was 67 years old. Looked like she weighed about 80 pounds. And one day she just went down the street dragging a sledgehammer, and she went up on a random person's porch. They had a huge one of these. It was an old house, so they had one of these huge front windows with the glass that was spun sometime around the turn of the century, and she could barely swing her sledgehammer, but she and she shattered the front window, and the homeowner was across the street, and he was on the phone with the police. Now, he saw the woman enter his yard with her sledgehammer, so he called the police. Now, unless there was a police car that just happened to be passing his house at that second, the police weren't going to do anything. They were going to arrive after the fact. The man's mother-in-law was inside the house watching this woman, and the baby was asleep in its bassinet right next to the window. So the mother-in-law watched the woman with her sledgehammer until she actually started swinging, and she saved the baby from the enormous guillotine-like pieces of plate glass falling. And they arrested her by sort of just walking up to her and taking the sledgehammer out of her hands. because she was 67 years old, crazy, and thin as a rail. Then they interviewed the homeowner, and he was crying because he'd gotten an estimate. It was going to cost 20 grand to fix his property. And it never occurred to him. It never occurred to him to run across the street and disarm the woman himself. He was waiting for the government to do something.
Right.
And he was chubby. He was a 100% beta male. He was a 100% Californian. Now he was crying on camera, and it was just the weirdest thing. It's like all instinct for self-preservation has been bred out of the Californian voter, and they look to the government to do everything for them. And they honestly believe that the government loves them and will sweep them up in its loving arms and protect them. They don't understand that the government is indifferent to their fate. The government, by its very nature, doesn't view us as individuals, but rather as tax-paying statistics. And we as individuals are expendable. The last Los Angeles County District Attorney proved that these horror stories of people, mothers of murdered children, just begging him to like punish the murderer, and they may as well have been speaking to a department store mannequin, because this man had no emotions.
It's something, I don't know if you remember, many moons ago, before we were on the air, that I told you about an idiot judge in Argentina that had refused to sentence a rapist who had raped a 10-year-old girl, because according to these female judges' wisdom, the rapist turned off the lights, and that showed empathy with the victim. He did not want her to be traumatized by what she saw.
How about what she felt?
I was going to say, at one point she knew what was being done to her, but the judge was this idiot who let the rapist go free because it had shown empathy with the victim. And I thought it was a one-off deprivation, that there couldn't be too many people like that in this world. But now I see the same thing happening regularly in England, in Denmark, in Spain, in Sweden. And what's wrong with this world? What's wrong with this world?
There was a case I saw an interview around the year 2000, maybe. These two 16-year-olds decided that they were going to terrorize and murder their best friend, who was a 16-year-old, and she was house sitting. And they made videos. They videotaped each other talking about what they were going to do. And what was amazing about this is that these two guys were not, I mean, they're evil, but they're evil in an incredibly stupid way. Like they had nothing against this girl. They kept saying, we just have to do it, And then they went over to the house. She invited them over to the house to watch a movie, and they left the basement door unlocked. And then they came back in. They spent half an hour using the breaker switches to turn the lights off and on. They made noises in the basement, and then they rushed her in the living room with knives and took her life. And they were immediately caught, and they were sentenced to life without parole. and one of them was interviewed. He's 33 now, and this guy was spewing out every sort of leftist trope you've ever heard in your life, and yet the interviewers they pointed out after the fact he never mentioned the dead girl's name once. He never expressed any remorse. It was all about how he had been led astray, and he was all better now, and he wanted to be released because he could still be a functional member of society. And he was still vacuous, but now he was full of leftist psychobabble. And I just thought, this guy's going to get out at some point, probably pretty soon. There's going to be people starting to push for him to be released because he's all better now. He's rehabilitated because he's barking out the same terms that they filled his head with. And they were pointing out how manipulative this guy was trying to be in his interview. And this is a psychopath. This is a pure and simple psychopath. And what psychopaths do is they manipulate people, and they get what they want, and they do things without feeling any remorse whatsoever.
So that's what defines them as such.
Exactly. And you absolutely know that the prison, the crime was committed in some leftist state, and you know that the only thing on their minds is to get this guy to repeat back what they're saying, and then they'll go, see, look, he's cured. He's cured by God. And nobody's talking about the poor girl that they not only murdered, but they first spent half an hour terrorizing to make sure that she died in abject horror. And this guy's going to do it again. His partner didn't. He refused.
Oh, the moment he's out.
Yeah, he'll manipulate a whole bunch of people into getting him what he wants, and then at some point he'll do it again because he's not shown any sign that he recognizes the atrocity he committed, but also the gravity of the atrocity he committed.
So I don't know that he doesn't realize it. He doesn't give a shit.
Yeah. No, he does. He fully understands what he did, but he doesn't care.
But he doesn't see it as an atrocity.
He's repeating back what he's been. Basically, the psychologist or whoever has been talking to him, they've been feeding him in bits and pieces a get out of jail free card, because that's their goal, is to get him out of jail.
Right. And you can ask Biden. He just commuted the sentences of a shitload that were guilty of such horrible crimes of rape and murder that they were in death row. Not anymore.
Yeah, and okay, all of this is a circular argument. I'm indifferent to the death penalty. I can live with either life without parole or the death penalty. I don't care either way. But one of the reasons we end up in this situation where somebody is now a changed person is because they've been on death row for 30 years. And, very few people are the same person after 30 years, especially if you're out of society. And, if this person,
some are worse.
Well, a lot are worse. But okay, there was some famous gangster who, his last name was Lebke or something like that. But anyway, he was wanted by the FBI, and he spent about a year hiding in walls, and he was living in walls in some apartment, and they finally found him. And this guy was tried and found guilty, and he was electrocuted, I think, like 8 months later. I mean, it was shocking.
Yeah.
But this was
Yeah.
1946. So,
Well, we didn't wait too long for Timothy McVeigh.
well, because that's because he wanted he felt that the truly heroic soldierly thing to do would be to go to his death with his head held high. But if you're trying to fight the death penalty, you can do it almost indefinitely. Um,
Mm.
and these people who think that the death penalty isn't a deterrent, well, why do these people fight like dogs to not be executed if it isn't a deterrent? You know, um,
Mm.
but California, the governor put a moratorium on the death penalty, so people are still being sentenced to death, but it doesn't matter because it's they're not nobody's allowed to carry out the death penalty. And Californians support having the death penalty on the book, but they don't want it implemented. And that tells you the mindset of the average
Yeah,
Californian.
they want to swim without getting wet.
Yeah,
They want to be uh, virtuous and not do controlled burns and not clear the forest of undergrowth and not save water in reservoirs and still be able to put out fires or prevent them.
yeah, and I mean, all of that has come to a head. Um, you have empty fire hydrants, you have empty reservoirs, you
Yeah.
have very few firefighters compared to in the past, you have fewer cops compared to in the past, and yet you're expecting all the same. You're, you're not accepting the fact. There's nobody out there who says, I will knowingly cut the police force and I will gladly accept a much higher crime rate. There's nobody
Right.
saying that. They say
No,
cut the police
if
force.
they did, if they did, I might respect them. If you say I'm going to cut off police and let the citizenship fend for themselves, um, and I know what's coming, but I'm ready to face it myself. I may disagree, but at least he's being honest. In California, no, in California, uh, they're spending $2.5 billion a year giving health care to every illegal, which, come to think of it, the customer base of the California healthcare system is 8 billion people because anybody in the world who manages to touch California gets free healthcare.
Oh yeah,
And then they cut the budget in 17 million here, 20 million there for firefighters, for police, for water management. I mean, come on, really. How stupid is the people of California that puts up with this shit?
well, my brother had an umbilical hernia and they repaired it using a method that was banned right after his operation. They used to put in a plastic mesh, and the mesh would be cut with scissors to fix. And what they didn't realize was that the cut edges were like little knives because when you cut with a
Yeah.
pair of scissors, the blade of the scissors they meet. A blade of a scissor in cross section is like this,
Yes.
and as a result, the cut material has a point like this because it conforms to the blade coming down. So they managed to puncture his intestines without knowing it. So he came home, and about 8 hours later, he was in terrible pain, and took him to the emergency room, and it was another 8 hour wait. We told him he had surgery this morning on his gut, and now his gut is in terrible pain. And they said, "Well, we've got a full room." They were treating people who didn't speak English and who were there because they had headaches, they had the sniffle,
Ingrown nails.
they had diarrhea. So after 8 hours, I told my brother, okay, brace yourself. The waiting room was full, so they had us sitting at these empty nurse stations. There were 8 nurse stations. There was one nurse on duty. So we were sitting at this empty nurse station, and there was a computer terminal right there. I said, I'm going to pick up this terminal and I'm going to throw it across the room. So I stood up for the terminal, and at exactly that second, this nurse met my eyes, and she turned sheet white, and she ran into the back room, and they came out and they took him in. And by this time, he had a systemic infection because he'd been waiting for 8 hours.
Sepsis.
They took him right into surgery. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital, and they used every known antibiotic, and they were down to the last 2. And the second to last known antibiotic finally worked. But for weeks, he was in a fever. He was delirious with fever.
Yeah.
So I went to visit him every day, and we would talk.
What was it? Streptococcus aureus?
Well, okay.
He got the infection in the hospital.
What?
He got the infection in the hospital.
No, he got the infection because they punctured his gut, and then he ate
in the hospital, in the operating room.
Right, but what happened was he ate, and he started to digest, and once the food got to his intestines, it spread throughout his body. So he wasn't infected in the hospital. He was infected because he had a hole in his gut, and that's how you end up with a systemic body infection. And so he had about 104-degree fever every time I go see him, and he'd just be raving like a lunatic about how he couldn't sleep because they were bowling in the hallway, and that the Air Force was patrolling with German Shepherds and all this stuff. And I was just very calming. They told me he was going to die, and because I cornered them and I said, look, you have to be honest. Like what are his chances? And they said, unfortunately, we can't stop the infection. They did stop it, but he ended up with 1 foot in the other dimension and came back with some pretty amazing stories. But they put all the non-English speaking people with headaches, all the people who don't have regular doctors, and who never have physicals, and they don't treat themselves. They let all their problems get to hell and gone, and they use the emergency room like a pharmacy, and all of it is free to them. That's why they do it.
And half of them are fishing for oxycodone or something.
Well,
I have a strong pain here.
No, and okay, that's another thing. California has now decided that if you undergo open heart surgery, they're not going to give you any heavy duty painkillers. They're going to give you Tylenol afterward, because they don't want to get you addicted. So the state is pure madness incarnate. We have a massive doctor shortage in this state, because it's impossible really to operate, to have a business here. You're supposed to give everything away for free, and you're prohibited from prescribing medications. When I had my I used to have really bad gastritis, and I had 2 severe attacks. And each time I went there, they gave me morphine. They injected me with morphine, and it was just like, the pain is gone. And I wasn't going to be able to get my hands on morphine, so they used it. It got me over the worst of it, and eventually I had I turned out I had stomach polyps, which is not the same as intestinal polyps. And
no.
Once you remove them, they don't come back. But the second time I had it, I went in and I said, I have gastritis and I'd like some morphine. The doctor said, oh, you know exactly the treatment we give you. And he said, just a second. And he came in with this lovely needle and gave me morphine through the IV. And it was like heaven. But I would dread to have gastritis today and go to emergency room. I think they would tell me to just grit my teeth and bear it, you know?
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
They're telling you to grit your teeth and bear it if your house burns down.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a stupid witch with a salary twice that of the President of the United States, twice, $750,000 taxpayer dollars a year. That's this bitch with zero experience, but obviously an ability to satisfy the sexual desires of whoever appointed her. Twice the salary of the United States president.
Well,
and then they're saying it has nothing to do, but the Santa Ynez Reservoir, which is the reservoir for the Pacific Palisades area, which was built eons ago when people knew what they were doing, it has been empty for reparations of some kind, but no construction equipment of any kind near it. And that's the one that fed the hydrants, and so the hydrants didn't have water. And the fire chief, who was selected not because of her ability to put out fires, but because she was going to bring lesbianism to the force, says, well, we don't have anything to do with water. All we have to do is go and put our houses in the hydrant, and if there is no water in the hydrant, there is nothing we can do.
Well, also the aircraft that are the water dropping aircraft are using seawater. They're not designed to use seawater. So all the aircraft that are using seawater at this point are going to be corroded in a few weeks. So because there's no time to go back and wash them off after each time they take a dip in the ocean.
They're not going to wash them in California because
there's no water.
Rivers are dry.
Yeah,
you have to bring it to Atlanta for a good wash down.
Exactly, and that's going to be too late. They're trucking in water, but it's all seawater, and the equipment.
I wonder what that's going to do to the soil.
That's another aspect. The trucks that are bringing in the seawater, they're going to be a write-off. The lesbian fire chief said that they have over 200 engine trucks that are out of service because there's no money to repair them, and the ones that are working now, a hell of a lot of them are using seawater, which means they're going to get fucked up too. So
yeah. I'm going to say this again because I'm obsessed with this. There is no money to repair the fire trucks, but there is $2,500 million for free health care for every illegal.
And $1.5 billion for homeless people. No, it's
which, by the way, never goes to the homeless.
No, of course not. That's why they spend. As of yet, they've lost. They can't account for $24 billion that was allocated for homeless people, and there's nothing to show for it. Literally nothing to show for it, but it's gone, and they can't locate it. I can locate it. It was in the pocket.
$24 billion
supposed to be solving the homeless problem.
Yeah, with $24 billion, they could have upgraded the water system in California and be growing lettuce on the rocks by now.
Yeah, but see, this is the voters. The voters voted to charge themselves an extra 0.5-cent sales tax to help the homeless. And it's like, you people never learn. You never learn. Back in
but you know that this stupid cow with 750 grand a year, plus the president of the Sierra Club, probably with another 6 7 figure salary, plus every stupid NGO from Save the Delta Spelt to save the spotted owl, to save the tree, to save the children, to save the. There's always somebody to be saved, according to these people. Uh, all of them with 6 7 figure salaries paid by the taxpayer. And by the time they actually do anything on the supposed objective of their being, it's nothing. Less than 20 cents on the dollar ever get to that, assuming it is important. Most often it isn't.
Well, all these organizations have a vested interest in making sure the problem is never solved. Because if the problem is solved, then they have to kiss goodbye to their salaries. And don't forget, in addition to their salaries, they're also getting benefits. They're getting
Oh,
free
yes.
healthcare. They're getting bonuses. They're getting free travel. They're getting, I went to a city hall meeting in my little city because they were going to oust the mayor who'd been mayor for 3 months, but they were going to blame him for the past 10 years of financial malfeasance. And they did it. And, he pointed out, I've been here 3 months. I haven't had enough time to even figure out what the records are. And they said, so what? You're out. But they spent the first hour reading the minutes. And these people were having working breakfasts, working lunches, and working dinners. They were having trips to
Every day.
They were having trips to Las Vegas to go to various highly important study meetings with their working breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And the city council consisted of, I think it was 6 people. 2 of them were physically identical. They were young Hispanic men who were each 150 to 200 pounds overweight. One was silent. She never said a word throughout the whole, and she abstained from all votes. And it was clown world. It was ridiculous. A working breakfast, that just means a free breakfast where you
Yes.
stuff your 400-pound body's face, and I don't know. It was very depressing.
It is. Were they having any weddings in Ghana?
They weren't having weddings in Ghana, but they sure went to Vegas a lot. And
Yeah. But you know what I'm mentioning, the weddings in Ghana, of course.
yeah, because that's where the mayor of Los Angeles was when all the fires broke out.
The Angelino Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
And that woman is so far above her level of incompetence, because I fail to see how the Democrat. Well, no, I don't fail to see how can the Democratic Party promote such a useless waste of oxygen, and how can such a useless waste of oxygen get almost 53% of the vote?
Because the voters are idiots. This woman's record was out there for everybody to see. She's been in government all her adult life. And
Yes.
her record of failure and incompetence was there for everybody to see, but they voted for her because she's a black woman. And, we have to promote black women because, we have to be kind to them. And that makes us feel good. We glow with the warmth of virtue. And, they're getting what they voted for. I don't see why they're so upset.
You see, they should have voted for Caruso because woman is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe they should have said that he was a black woman or felt like one, and maybe that would have fooled them into it.
There's no thought that goes into anything, and this is why several high-ranking, prominent leftists have abandoned leftism. And when you listen to them explain their thinking process before, basically they didn't have a thinking process.
Bingo.
The woman Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks,
Yes.
she became friends with a man in her building. They became very close friends, and she accidentally discovered that he was a conservative, and it blew her mind because he wasn't a Nazi, he wasn't a racist. He didn't want to line people up against the wall and have them shot. He was her friend, and that was the first time she started questioning her reasoning on everything. And she explained that she believed everything she was told. So basically, she wasn't thinking. She wasn't thinking for a couple of decades. And, you know, I don't get it, but that's apparently how they operate.
Yeah, well, thinking is very much against the Gestalt. Collectivism does not value the thinking of individual members of the club. They have to adhere to the ideology, they have to adjust their lives to it, they have to obey the dictates of the party. In the Communist Party, they do it openly, party discipline. If you don't do what you're told, you get expelled from the party and you lose your friends and your livelihood. Uh, if you're a Democrat, pretty much the same thing happens, though they're not so open about the rule. You're not gonna get a job. You're not gonna get your friends if you do not toe the line. Uh, as much as Democrats like canceling conservatives in social media, they like canceling each other in every aspect of their lives.
Well, that's the thing. The Democrats, contrary to what a lot of conservatives think, the Democrats are not monolithic, especially now. They're fighting each other tooth and nail, and it's they're in complete disarray. They don't have anybody coming up through the ranks who's going to save them. All the young Democrats are idiots, you know, like Ocasio-Cortez. They keep speaking about running her for president in 28. I mean,
The stupid cow, the first time she was elected to Congress, it was already talking about running for president on the next election, forgetting about the fact that she would be 30 years old in the next election. She's been running for president since she was 28.
mhm.
And she's not going to get much closer than she is now. And you know, I'm not so sure about this. I do think they are monolithic in a number of important issues. They do put the ideology ahead, and they're not expected to think. They're expected to follow the talking points and follow the ideology. Now, in this particular moment, they are in disarray because, God, the whole apparatus is collapsing on their heads. But you are going to see how they make every effort to whip everybody into compliance and follow the new and improved socialist democratic thought within the next 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they'll decide that it's better to be democratic socialist than anything else. But um, the whole issue is that, okay, the voters. I say the voters are extremely monolithic, especially here in California. The voters in California are far more leftist than they themselves realize. You know, their own viewpoints are since they don't give any real thought to why they do things themselves.
I'm gonna leave you alone on camera. Keep going. I'll hear, but I need to go and check something back there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, the Californians are far more leftist. The California voters are far more leftist than they understand themselves. And you know, if if the voters finally get the fact, and I don't think they will, but if they did get the fact that leftism itself is what brought them all this misery, not climate change, um, then they won't be able to be leftists anymore. They'll have a crisis of identity. But um, I don't think it's going to happen because the fires are still burning, but already they're back to attacking Trump and Zuckerberg and they've crossed the threshold, and now they're attacking Trump's supporters. It used to be that they didn't do that as openly as they're doing it now, but they're doing it now. And you hear people saying that oh, we're all in this together. That okay, the mayor of Los Angeles, we're all in this together. No, they're not. And you certainly, Madam Mayor, are not in it together with the people who lost everything. You didn't lose everything. They okay. It goes back to what I was talking about with that former 16-year-old murderer who's now in his 30s. As long as he says the right thing, he's going to get parole, and it won't matter at all to the prison warden or the parole board. They're not going to give any thought to whether or not he's genuinely rehabilitated. They just want to hear him say what they've been saying to him, and if he says it 100% accurately, then they'll let him go. And
Same thing always. Yeah, you mentioned just now how at one point, if they stop blaming global warming, they may realize that they are the ones who screwed up, right?
mm-hmm.
Eh, well, that is nowhere near today's events. Look at the headline today. And these are going to see in a bunch of newspapers because these idiots feed nearly every newspaper in the country. Climate change contributed to a week of wild weather that upended life in the US. How?
Yeah.
What the fuck is so new about the Santa Ana winds? What is so new about droughts in California? What is so new about fires made worse by 30 years of undergrowth? What's new? What's changed?
Well, this keeps happening. I don't know how long ago it was, but an entire town burned to the ground, and hundreds of people were killed, and it was all for the same reason as this. They hadn't done any clearing of the dead, rotten forest. They hadn't done any clearing of the underbrush.
Yeah, and of course, they also blame the snow in DC. I remember skiing on the streets of DC. Actually, I remember skiing in New York. Uh,
In 1920, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps had to use flamethrowers to melt the snow and ice in New York City.
yeah, in 1984, I was dropped for 3 days at JFK after a blizzard with the Coast Guard bringing us food and blankets by helicopter. So, and there was another one in 76, and there was another one in the 60s. It's like every 10 freaking years, you get snowed out. All of this shit, blaming some kind of mythical climate change for these events is not borderline lunatic. It is lunacy.
Well, you're talking about this is a religion. It's an article of faith that this is happening. So because it's an article of faith, they don't have to present any evidence.
No.
I heard some actor saying that now Zuckerberg's platforms, what I guess Facebook and Instagram, they're going to be flooded with climate deniers. And it's
Oh
like,
my God.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah, because
you better run for the hills, buddy, I guess. I don't know.
they won't be
Who cares?
censored
I mean,
anymore.
every now and then I go to Twitter when a big story is happening, and you have these comments that you 100% disagree with, and they're venomous, but you just scroll over them because you're looking for news. You can't get caught up in
No.
like going after people who are venomously in disagreement with you, or people who hate you. Like okay, the leftist voter has graduated into genuine earth-shattering hatred of people who vote differently, and they prove it over and over and over again. When a city in a red state is hit by a tornado or whatever, they get all, well, okay. When the firefighter was killed on during the Trump assassination attempt, you had big name leftists who were celebrating this. The guy deserved to die because he went to a Trump.
They were celebrating a hurricane in Florida not 6 months ago.
Yeah.
When the FEMA assholes were bypassing houses with Trump signs on them. And this was no hoax. This was true. Homeland Insecurity admitted it. They promised they were going to take measures to prevent this in the future. Of course, they haven't.
Of course
but
not.
It's all lunacy. And I've been in many catastrophes because I happen to pick the areas, man. We put ourselves our bootstraps. I've seen neighbors helping neighbors. I've seen things. My house is in an area that is in the outer edges of the area affected by Helene. As a matter of fact, I am in the disaster zone. Now, I didn't suffer any damage because my house is on higher ground and all that jazz. But we're there, and we've seen a lot of people helping people, and nobody thinks of waiting for the feds to come. Incidentally, we just had a snow, the same one that is alarming the Associated Press. Well, my dog seems to be taking it in stride. Now, that's one worried putsch, don't you think?
Yeah. When I lived in Tyler, Texas from
Yeah, go ahead.
I lived in Tyler, Texas from 1972 to 1975. And in the winter of 72, it snowed heavily. And the neighbor across the street was a man who's in his 70s. And he said this was the first time it snowed. This was the first time it snowed that he could remember in his lifetime. And nobody said a word about climate change at the time. They just said it's an anomaly that sometimes happens.
Yeah.
Nobody.
But what we're seeing today is no anomaly.
Well, exactly. I mean,
Snow in Tennessee, snow in DC. I mean, come on, people. What the hell are we talking about?
Well, it's a religion, and they're you can't get people to disbelieve it. You know, the Democratic Party is all about projection now. They say that the Trump supporters are in a cult. Anything but. We just had this big over H-1B visas within the Trump supporter group. So that sort of open disagreement wouldn't be allowed in the Democratic Party.
No, we disagree on a number of things, frankly. Not only H-1B visas, and it's all part of the process of curing ideas. And somebody will throw something to the ceiling and see if it sticks, and others will criticize it. There are several arguments going on right now, from Greenland and Panama to Canada and H-1B visas, and there is no monolithic position on any of them.
Well, and nobody's losing their marbles over it. And, you know, in the case of the Democrats, you if you even ask questions, then you were branded a traitor, and you have to be, you know, they point at you and they make that sound that, you know, Donald Sutherland did at the end of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you know. So, you know, I don't know. I couldn't imagine being a leftist. I can't imagine it. I can't imagine.
No, I can't. You see, the problem is that for me to become a leftist, it would be an extremely, I am told, painful process, because the lobotomy, well, rather, they don't do a lobotomy, but the brain reduction procedure, I am told, is very, very, very painful. So I'm not even gonna try. Let them say what they are. I've had people tell me, well, people that I've known for many years, oh, you support Trump? Well, yes, I do. Well, then this conversation must come to an end. I don't talk to people who support Trump. And in one case, I remember, I just wanted to see what the reaction was. And I said to this lass, who's a very nice woman, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that a 40-year friendship will come to an end because of your intolerance. And there was a little silence on the other side of the line. I imagined the robot in Lost in Space. It does not compute. It does not compute. How dare he tell me I'm intolerant when I'm being intolerant? And after this silence, she goes like, oh, okay, so how is your daughter doing now? 190-degree turn, to her credit, I might say. But the point is, they live in a bubble. They live surrounded by an echo chamber. They forbid themselves the possibility of interaction with others. And since we are all talking about Greenland, let me say that is what led to the demise of the Norse in Greenland. You see, the Norse were very successful at a time where Greenland was, well, green.
Yeah, it was known as Vineland.
Yeah, well, Vineland was actually Newfoundland. Greenland was during the warm period, is what they call it in the Middle Ages, from 800 to 1200, roughly, give or take 50 years. It was a pretty warm place, and the Norse who lived there lived off of agriculture, and they planted wheat and linen, and they made their clothes with linen and wool, and ate bread base diet and the animals they hunted, and then the cold started coming in gradually. And as it did, their crops began to falter. The animals that they hunted disappear, and with the ice came a different people that was coming from the Americas, the Inuit. And the Inuit lived in a completely different manner. They didn't hunt ground animals. They hunted whales. They didn't eat bread. They ate blubber. And the church, the Catholic Church, which was prevalent at the time, prohibited the Norse from having any kind of contact with these devilish people, with these heathens, lest they pollute your thought. And they didn't. And because they didn't have any kind of interchange, commercial or otherwise, with the Inuit, they never learned how to survive in the cold. And they ended up dying miserably, some in their homes. The bones that have been found have evidence of malnutrition. And that was it. When peoples do not interact, they may miss on the opportunity to learn that which will enable their survival. It was true to the North, and it's true to us. And it's true to political movements. That communication, whether you agree with people or not, is vital for our survival. And I don't think people realize that.
Well, if you think your opponents, it's so embarrassing to say, but if you think your opponents are literal Nazis who are going to put, gay people in concentration camps and force women to stay inside and spew out this endless stream of babies, if you honestly think that, then you're going to hate your opponents. But again, the lack of self-awareness. We're all suffering because leftists insist on imposing their own values on everybody else. So, everything that they disagree with has to be banned. They don't believe in the notion of live and let live. It's you have to ban everything that I don't like, and those are not people with whom one can have conversations or interact with, because the second you interact with them, they're gonna want to take something away from you. That's their ideology.
Look at the people condemning Elon Musk,
imposing their own values on others by force.
Yeah, look at the people condemning Elon Musk for speaking in favor of his ideas. Look at the people condemning Mark Zuckerberg, who I dislike, for finally either seeing the light or fearing the tide is changing and he wants to be on top of it. The very same people who criticize Elon Musk for supporting a cause or another are the people who celebrate George Soros for spending hundreds of millions pushing their ideas. The same people who criticize Mark Zuckerberg because he says, no, we're not going to continue censoring, have no fucking problem with, I don't know, Bill Gates advocating for censorship.
Well, because they're unself-aware.
Right. They are very worried about billionaires interfering with elections, only if they're not their billionaires, in which case they celebrate it.
Well, I mean, they don't know. I mean, if you spoke to them about George Soros, they wouldn't know what he does. I mean, these are shockingly ignorant people. They don't know anything, and it's proven time and time and time again by just simply asking them. I've seen them asked, okay, you say from the river to the sea, from which river to which sea? They don't know. They're just repeating what everybody else is repeating.
Yeah, it's from the Mississippi to the Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's actually I would give them that. Greenland, since we were talking about that, somebody asked in the chat a little while ago. I'm really cracking up with the discussion on Greenland because apparently nobody knows anything about Greenland. I'm very, very surprised. I know, it's out of sight and out of mind, and nobody gives a crap, and nobody's gone to Nuuk for a holiday. So it's kind of like a quaint little place with a lot of Inuit living in little boxes and speaking Danish. Um, Number one, people would ask me, do you think Trump is going to buy Greenland from Denmark? No. The Danish Prime Minister, Denmark is not for sale. Well, Gail, is not for you to say. Because Denmark is not a lot owned by Denmark. It is a province of Denmark that has home government and a treaty with Denmark that allows for their independence if they so vote. And they managed to get out of every aspect of the European Union they didn't like because they didn't like European fishermen depleting their waters. So, can anybody buy Greenland? Yes, from Greenlanders, not from Denmark. There are things that if Trump wanted, military bases or some ability to counter the Russians in the Arctic, or the Chinese for that matter, well, it can be done. Imagine that. Uh, by the way, why is Greenland not voted for independence yet? Because for as long as they are not independent, they're getting 700 million euro in subsidies from Denmark. If they become independent, they lose the subsidies. And 700 million euro in Greenland is a shit ton of money. Okay, offer them subsidies, or let's say in the form of lease of land for military bases if they become independent, and do it. Now, if anybody, somebody saying there are military bases already, yes, since World War II. Actually, the only two airports in that god forgotten island were built by the American military during World War II. Not particularly advanced, but we need other stuff there. And it's not a shit ton of people.
Yeah, 50,000 people in all of Greenland.
Yeah, not of Greenland. It's not a lot of people. And, we pay them a nice little lease for land so that we can have our modern military facilities, and everybody's happy, and Denmark has zero say on it. Zero. They are observers in this process. We can discuss, it's a separate discussion, whether it's worth it or not. I happen to believe it is. Given the position, because in anything that the Russians get out of their northern ports to the Atlantic goes through the shores of Greenland for a long way. So it's very much, I believe, in our interest. But Will it involve a purchase? No. Do I want the 56,000 Inuit in Greenland to have two senators in the US Congress, which most likely will be Democrats? Fuck no. I don't want two Democratic senators from Greenland, as I don't want two Democratic senators from Puerto Rico or anywhere else for that matter. It would be disastrous for us long term if we were to do that stupid thing. What do you think about Greenland?
Well, I mean, Trump is he's starting his negotiation by offering up an extreme position that he doesn't believe in, and then the Greenlanders and to a certain extent Denmark, even though they're bystanders, they're replying, we're not for sale and fuck you. Okay, you both. It was the way Trump ended up with his relationship with North Korea. North Korea said, we're going to nuke you. And Trump said, well, we'll nuke you back. And once those two statements were out there, then they both said, well, we're not going to nuke you. And we said, yeah, we don't want to nuke you either. And then they got to get together. And it'll be the same thing with Greenland.
Yeah. And I want to say something else, because other than the strategic value of Greenland, people talk about, Greenland becoming a territory of the U.S. Fat chance. Like I said, they're at most an independent country. They're already in charge of their foreign relations, independent from Denmark. And there is a Greenland embassy in Washington, among others. They have about 7, I believe. The other thing that everybody talks about is the Arctic shipping routes. What percentage of U.S. trade? Let me make it easier. What percentage of the world trade goes through Arctic shipping routes? And how does it work in winter? Oh, things.
So, wait, are you asking me? I don't know. I have no idea. It's not something I think about.
The only one who uses Arctic shipping routes is Santa Claus when he comes down from the North Pole. There is no such thing. We've been dreaming of a northern passage since the times of Drake. And there is no such thing. It's impassable in winter. Every now and then it opens up for 5 years and it closes down again. Fuck it. But there is no trade going on there. We have a real problem with real shipping routes in fucking Bab el Mandeb, which is still essentially closed down by the Houthis. And we're dreaming of some kind of sea route north of the Arctic Circle. What kind of crap is that?
Well, I mean, it's easy to talk about things when you don't know anything about them. I mean, in the case of Greenland, I mean, it's clear Trump has been very clear that, it has to do with our national security. So he's talking about bases. Yes. And as for the Houthis, I mean, the Houthis are going to be a problem until the Iranian mullahs are gone. That's all there is to it. Yeah. And
they might precede them.
The Houthis, you can hit the Houthis as hard as you want. They don't learn. I mean, they're savages. They're in their life. Death is no different than getting a sandwich for lunch. So you can bomb the hell out of them, and they just get more stuff. And I think that the signs show that the mullahs will be taken on and they will be toppled, and then the Iranians will hopefully be smart and not go for a dictatorship or an empire or anything like that. It looks like it. I mean, Syria on almost a daily basis, the new government in Syria is like showing that it's not going to be an emirate. It's not going to be another Assad-like dictatorship. It's not going to be a jihadist state. So if Syria can do it, then certainly Iran can.
Well, Iran definitely can. Iran without the mullahs will revert to what it was before the mullahs. And it will be a fairly open society. The Iranian people have no problem with Israel. You remember even 2, 3 years ago, before all of this crap, when the mullahs would paint Israeli flags on the sidewalk or in the entrances to the universities, and people will become contortionists to negotiate that flag without stepping on it. And you would see the crowds coming in and then opening up and going through little tiny corners and fusing again as a little gesture of rebellion against the mullahs. So I do think that once the revolutionary art is gone, once the Islamic Republic is gone, Iran will revert to being a good neighbor to the Arabs and Israel, and will prosper in ways that most Iranians alive today cannot even imagine.
Yeah, and you know, the Iranians aren't Russians, for example. Russians are xenophobic, bitter, and primitive. And you know, Iranians are. If you look at videos made by Iranians, they're a lot more sophisticated than anything you see. The Russians film the latest Ukrainian attack, and they narrate it, and the voice doing the narration sounds like a 10-pack a day smoker who downs 3 bottles of vodka a day. And you know, the Ukrainians just hit the air fuel storage depot that feeds all the bombers that drop the missiles that are fired at Ukraine. So, you know, basically, unless the Russians somehow come up with more aviation fuel, that's done. You know, the Ukrainians also captured 2 North Koreans alive, and believe it or not, they said they were told they were going to Russia for a military exercise. They had no idea they were going into combat, and you know, nothing that the Russians are in exactly the state of collapse that the American Democrats are in. And you know, the Chinese economy is it's in free fall. So that's why every other week now the Chinese announce a new military exercise and invading Taiwan. They just announced that they're building troop carrying barges to invade Taiwan, and they'll be ready in the next couple of years. And it's like, are they torpedo proof? You know, it's like you can't be serious.
They might as well build gondolas.
Well, the Nazis had Operation Sea Lion, which was going to be the invasion of Britain, and there was never any chance that this was going to happen because all these troop carrying ships and barges would be bombed from the air. The British had a few submarines at the time, but mostly they were going to rely on air power. And
yep,
you know, the Chinese are going to be hit with air power and with submarines. I mean, it can't happen. The minute they start marshaling their troops and organizing the barges and load them up, they're going to be hit. You know, it's
like we've been saying for years now. China will invade Taiwan the day the Chinese figure out how to walk on water.
Well, and how to make themselves bomb and torpedo proof as they walk on water.
Yeah. No, no, it's absurd. And by the way, what are they going to use? Their new cardboard plane? Uh, what are they going to use? Those J-20s that can fly for shit?
Well, I think the Chinese, on a certain level, they hope, like the Russians, that at some point everybody's just going to give up. They're just going to say, okay, you can have Taiwan. We're afraid. We don't want to fight you because you're scary and you have
Which
all
is
these.
something the Democrats would do.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's what they have done. The Democrats have done it. I don't know. It's
Maybe if a Biden is president of the U.S. and tells China, well, if it is a week-long, short military intervention, then we have no problem with that. Which is what Biden told Russia over Ukraine.
Yeah, a small incursion.
Yeah. If you make it into a small incursion and inside of a week you control Taipei, then I guess there's no problem with that. That's what Democrats would do. Not because they are inherently coward, which I believe they are, and that's why John Kerry was wounded in his ass, but because they really want this. They want to bring the U.S. down a few notches and have regional powers that challenge it, because then that would be a juster world, without the U.S. imperialistic hegemonic control of the planet. They can go fuck themselves.
As an imperial power, the U.S. sucks.
On wheels.
Yeah,
On
I mean,
wheels.
we're a complete failure as an empire, and leftists mistake seeing people wearing American clothes and smoking American cigarettes. They say that's American hegemony, and it's like, no, that's people choosing something that the whole world hates America, and they all want to be Americans. They all want to come here and be Americans. And once you have that mindset, it's just like, okay, whatever, blah 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 blah. Just stop talking. I'm tired of hearing it.
Yeah, it's the only empire that instead of exacting tribute from the world, gives them aid.
Of course, and that embarrasses them, and so it makes them hate the gift giver. I don't know. This is a pathology that can't be rationally explained, so it just has to be accepted and then ignored. I lived in Europe from 75 to 81, and in Norway, I was forced into so many political discussions with people years and years and years older than me, and I tell them, I'm not even old enough to vote. Why are you insisting on having this conversation? And it was like, well, it's important that you know what we think. It's like, but I don't care what you think.
No, it isn't. I don't give a shit what you think.
Yeah,
I had the same problem in France.
Like
I had the same problem in France. In Italy, in England, in Spain, I never had that problem. In France, I did. Same stupid mentality.
Yeah. And here's the French sinking Greenpeace boats and doing nuclear tests that the whole world says you shouldn't, and then they turn around and wag their feet, or strafing unarmed civilians in the Ivory Coast,
or starting what turned out to be the massacre in Rwanda.
Yeah.
Or landing parachutists and the massacre quite a number of the population in Chad. That's something that I used to ask people, and they would stare at me blankly. Which is the country that has conducted the most foreign invasions? since World War II? France.
Well, there's no other country that has the same fighting unit as the French Foreign Legion. The French Foreign Legion, they qualify as special operators.
It's the Wagner Group.
Exactly. They're a hell of a lot of them are criminals who are escaping punishment from somewhere else. And
in the 50s, half of them were SS and Gestapo, who ran to France and joined the Foreign Legion and hid in North Africa. Why do people not talk about the fact that the Foreign Legion was a refuge for Nazis?
Well, and it's a refuge today for, people who are wanted by Interpol. So,
yeah,
and the French know this. And the French Foreign Legion, the way they fight, they're not famous for taking prisoners. And the French all know this. The government all knows this. But at the same time, we're at the receiving end of French lectures on how to be good world citizens, and it's just like, we're the best world citizens who exist.
You mentioned in passing, but let's clarify the bombing of the Greenpeace ship. By the way, I have zero sympathy for Greenpeace. Let me clarify that. But there are limits. The French sent an intelligence team to place bombs in a civilian ship anchored, I think it was in Australia, and bomb it out of existence. Can you imagine if anybody found that the US sent a SEAL team to put bombs in an open arms ship and sink it in front of Sicily?
Well, it would end up with
What would the reaction be?
It would end up with the president resigning, is what would happen.
Yeah, in France, no, everybody celebrated it. And what was Greenpeace doing? Greenpeace was protesting the nuclear tests on Bikini Island, and we're sailing into the island so that the French wouldn't be able to trigger the test. I mean, come on. What kind of lesson are they going to give us? Why don't they explain to us what they do with the euro with the African euro and how they exploit countries in the Sahel? When did they tell us how they benefit from child slave labor in Senegal, in Chad? Why don't they tell us exactly what they're doing? They're a bunch of fucking hypocrites.
Well, I mean, all of Europeans are, because some okay, the Chinese and the Soviets committed two of the greatest atrocities in human history. They were sort of one-time deals. Europeans have been committing mass atrocities for centuries, if not millennia. And the only reason that they stopped was because we forced them to stop. We got tired of being dragged into their squabbles. We were dragged into their world wars twice. And so we finally said, okay, that's enough. We're gonna take away your toys. And that allowed Europeans to go all socialist, because you can't have free everything and exceptional armed forces at the same time. You have to choose between them. And now that okay, it's going to take Russia decades to rebuild, but Russia has finally shown its true nature. And don't kid yourself. Whoever replaces Putin is going to be just as bad.
Yes, bad.
There's
No,
no,
I'm more jaded on Russia than that. No, there's no fucking way whoever replaces Putin will be anything other than an asshole.
and one could argue that it'll be even worse because he'll be more degraded.
Yes, and we'll probably play victim and try to get help from the U.S. And depending on the government in the U.S., they'll get it. Like Yeltsin did, like Putin did.
Yeah.
It's we have this notion that we can buy sympathy from these medieval assholes, and there is no such thing.
Buy loyalty. You could never buy loyalty from anyone.
No, and especially not from these, like I say, medieval overlords. The society, the culture in Russia is incompatible with civilization.
Yeah,
They went
I mean,
from
they're
they went from serfdom to communism to whatever the fuck they want to call whatever they have now, which I believe is a return to serfdom by another name. But just because they have a few cosmopolitan areas in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and well, that's about it. Doesn't mean that the rest of the country is not pretty much what it was in the time of Tsar Nikolai.
Yeah, there's a Russian channel. It's called Vasya in the Hay, and he's like a social worker. He goes around and he tries to help people, and the recidivism rate is astonishing. He takes people who he found living in half demolished cabins with no running water, and he gets them apartments and everything, and within a matter of months they've reverted to alcoholism and prostitution and
the first winter they're gonna burn the furniture in the bathtub to heat the apartment.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of savage you're dealing with. I remember having to train a few savages here and there, people who were brought to me, and it's hard to imagine, but it exists. There were people when we did the Hajj from Malaysia to Jeddah. There were people from Malaysia that would get into the closets in the aircraft had curtains.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you recall that. We had closets in the back with curtains. Those people would go in behind the curtains and take a shit.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what a toilet was and didn't fucking care. All they needed was a little bit of privacy. We had to hose down the plane every time we landed in Jeddah. I remember a guy that was paired to me as a kind of my role was that of a big brother, though this guy was a couple of years older than me. He was coming in from the countryside. I cannot tell you what the look on his face was the first time we rode on an elevator. He thought we were going to die.
Mm-hmm.
I had to teach him how to use a bathroom because he had never seen a toilet. At most, a hole in the ground, but generally speaking, just a ravine. Russians are like this. Russians living there, there is a huge population density in Moscow and St. Pete. And the rest is 1600s feudal Russia. It hasn't changed.
No, and during this current war, the so-called cosmopolitans have reverted to savagery, and you know the best Russians fled the country. You hear from them every now and then, but they're still Russian. Um,
Yeah, I'm surrounded by them here in Florida.
yeah, and people accuse Trump and his supporters of being these outrageous, dangerous nationalists. Russians are nationalists in a really primitive way, where it's a kind of
Tribal.
it's an ethnic nationalism that
Yeah, it's pure tribalism.
it believes that the only way they know they're up is if they've got their boots on the necks of other people, and Americans don't believe that. We don't want boots on our necks, and we don't want to put our boots on anybody else's necks. Not
No,
not Trump supporters at any rate.
Americans generally for the past 200 years, we had opportunities to do so. We had opportunities to expand our territory and power, and we didn't. And we
No,
didn't. And
and what people don't understand about the U.S. is every time we win a war, we unilaterally disarm, and there's no other country that keeps doing that. And you know, Harry Truman gutted all the armed forces to the point where when we had to go to war only 5 years later, we had nothing to really fight with.
Carter did the same shit.
Of course,
Clinton did the same shit. Obama did the same shit. And right now, we have our forces depleted to the point that we practically have to start anew again.
well,
Not counting the degradation of morale in the armed forces, the introduction of DEI, the introduction of transgenderism and rainbow flags and shit like that. That is not the business of a military.
no, and there's all this outrage over the fact that Pete Hegseth is going to go in and sweep all of that out, and it's like, but it has to be done. There has to be there has to
I'm
be
trusting and hoping that he will.
there has to be a realization that the armed forces are not they're not built to deal with things like transgenderism and representation and diversity and all of that. They're there to use weapons against a potential enemy, to deter the enemy, and if necessary, use weapons. And when you were using weapons, diversity and transgenderism play no part in combat.
Like it plays no part in firefighting.
Yeah, I mean, lesbians, in terms of lesbianism doesn't bring anything to the table when you're a firefighter. Okay, there's some idiot assistant chief who got in trouble. First, she said that when their houses are burning down, they feel more at ease when someone who looks like them shows up to fight the fire. I don't think that crosses the mind of anybody. I think their mind is at ease when someone shows up to fight the fire. But the fact that it's a white person, a black person, an Asian person.
By the way, when the firefighter is in full firefighting gear, how the fuck do you know whether they're male, female, black, white, or green?
Well, how many conversations do you get into with firefighters when your house is on fire and the firefighters show up to burn down the house? They don't pull up a chair and sit down and put their hand on your knee and say, I'm here to help you. They push you out of the way and say,
Yeah.
they speak
And
to
if
each other.
and if you cannot move, I hope they can lift you and put you on on their shoulders and get you out of there. And like that stupid cow from LA who says that if you put yourself in a position where you need to be taken out, maybe you shouldn't have been there.
Yeah,
Is
and
that a firefighter talking?
as a firefighter, but okay, she's grossly overweight.
Can you imagine the firefighters in New York saying, "Well, if you're stupid enough to go to an 87th floor, it's your fucking problem, and I'm staying here."
Well, but see, this is California. I mean, for one thing, she's physically unfit to be a firefighter. In the little PSA she made, it showed her trying to run. She can't run.
Yep.
In let's see, was it the Empire State Building? There used to be an annual race to the top of, I think, the Empire State Building.
I think it was the Empire State Building. Yes.
And for several years in a row, it was a firefighter in his 50s who won every time. And this 280-pound entity telling us that if we get in a position where we have to be dragged to safety, it's our fault. They showed her trying to run, and she was like waddling like a hippopotamus. And but see, this is what the voters want. The voters in California want, they believe that having diversity brings something that is somehow valuable to everything, including firefighting and combating the enemy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They can't explain how that diversity helps.
Except for diversity of opinion.
Yeah, of course.
We don't want that diversity. By the way, let me take 1 second here. Thank you, 1984. And this is where I shamelessly ask for your money. Don't worry, we don't do it all the time, just a couple of times at the show. We do this without sponsors, without advertising, without collecting data. We do this without any other source of income but the goodwill of the people watching. There are over 800 watching right now in several media. A buck from everyone would go an enormous way to allow us to improve. Maybe one day have a producer so that little mishaps like earlier today don't happen so often. And we ask you to do it if you can, in order to keep this free. And there are several ways of doing this. You can come to Odyssey. We encourage you to do so. The link is in all of the descriptions, whether it be YouTube or X. And just click on the link and come over. Once you're here, you can avail yourself of several venues. Number one, click on subscribe and notifications so that you know when we are in the air. That one's free. Then you can click support and make a one-time donation to the channel, or click on the dollar sign and make a donation in the chat like 1984 just did, or click on join and become a member of this channel. There are several categories of membership, and that will give us a monthly income that allows us to plan for future endeavors. If none of those are to your liking, you can always come to quadverum.com/support us and drop a buck, one-time donation or recurrent donation. It's your choice in just about any amount you wish to do it. And finally, the last one in my timeline, and hopefully, eventually, we're going to be able to do the same thing in Thomas's. But it doesn't matter because the money collected there goes to this Quad Verum enterprise. you can subscribe to at the Brother Lie and get some content, but most importantly, you'll be supporting Quadverum Forum and Quadverum TV. And that's it. Thank you very much if you can do it. And Thomas, we're back at the end of the shameless pandering.
Ah,
Oof.
sounds good.
I'm trying to make it shorter every time. We'll see. Um, on Halloween, dress up on a tricorn and a hat and point a flintlock at the camera and say, "Stand and deliver, if you would be so kind." The 4th of July would be a better opportunity for that. But I think that, let me see, YouTube will permanently ban us. You point a replica gun at the camera on a live session in YouTube, and I don't want to be swatted again. Okay, uh, once was enough. Twice was for show. I've been swatted twice, and I don't want the third time. Thank you very much if I can avoid it. I'm sure there is a fucking asshole Democrat out there who's planning the third one, but I don't want to help them. And these people have no sense of humor. Would you
Well,
do it, Thomas?
no, I mean, I had the FBI at my house because of all I did was just display a firearm. So um, there's
Can you?
all these gun channels on YouTube, and you know YouTube demonetizes them, so they get their own advertisers. So then
Yep.
YouTube tries to, I don't know what, like I see channels now that they blur out firearms, you
Yep.
know, and there was a movie.
But still, there is a different treatment.
What?
If it is it's still there is a dual treatment. If you have a recorded program, they will do all of these shenanigans. If you have a live program, they'll suspend you.
If you have a live program, what?
And you show GANs, they will suspend you.
Hmm.
Not on the recorded version, but yes on the live version. Why? Fuck if I know.
Well, maybe at some point YouTube will follow in the steps of Musk and Zuckerberg. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? I'm a strong believer that mankind goes on an improving line, though sometimes there are steps back. So, on the other hand, it's Emery's idea. It's kind of humorous. I wish we could do it. Stand up and deliver. Oh, I could try that one with colonial attire, of course.
No, the less interaction I have with institutions, the better. All institutions eventually go leftist, so at some point you're gonna come across some issue with an institution, and it's going to turn into this big ridiculous Megillah. So
Yeah. The only thing that I would ask our audience is, if you help us, Quadverum would never will go left. Quadverum will remain a bastion of conservatism in a wide sense. The only time that we had to do something was when we were facing deplatforming. At the time, uh, we were debanked, we were suspended from Twitter, and we were being threatened with deplatforming altogether. And unlike others, we don't have resources to um, to move about, to create our own internet supplier, to create our own. I tried with our own servers. Do you have any idea the amount of money necessary for these videos? Just on the data transfer, when 1,000 people or 2,000 people or 3,000 people watch them, and somebody says, "Promise not to go full Lincoln Project." I promise to go full on Lincoln Project. Um, so the only thing that could keep us alive, and it did, was our viewers' support, and that's why we are so grateful for that. But
Well, the project is a perfect example of they're the big heroes for the leftists. They get nothing done. They flop. They're completely ineffective. One of the founders was a child molester, and yet they get money. They get invited on shows. They get that idiot Rick Wilson. The day before the elections, he made two predictions, and the second prediction was that Kamala was going to get 478, electoral votes, and that Trump was done and all of this. And then the next day, he came back and said, "Well, I was wrong, but my heart was in the right place." And everyone went,
we keep on fighting, and they're going to have another 20 million to spend next time around.
yeah, exactly.
We we
So
don't we don't get millions from the Democratic Party and its affiliates, and um, we count on the premise that conservatives value work, and if they like what we do, they will pay, and if they don't, we will fail, and that's the end of it. Oh, a real piece of work, says Kelly about Rick Wilson. By the way, Rick Wilson, how can those people talk others into giving them their money to waste it miserably and always be on the wrong side?
well, because it's wish casting. They're all wish casting. That all these people making these predictions that Kamala was going to win in a landslide when there was zero evidence that this was going to happen. At very, very best, it was going to be a tight race. I didn't think it was going to be a tight race. And they're witch casting. They're pretending. They're infantile. They're childish. They it's like a little kid saying, "My father's going to beat the hell out of your father. He's going to throw him to the moon. He's going to grab him by the front of the shirt and toss him across the ocean." And, it's like, okay, you're 5 years old, so you have an excuse. But when you're an adult and you're gleefully rubbing your hands, I mean, all the videos of these people starting out election night, just happy as clams, saying the champagne is on ice, and getting more and more nervous, and then finally panicking, and then finally like ready to commit suicide. These are childish people. These are ridiculously childish people.
Yeah, and sometimes, somebody's saying in the chat how Bill Crystal flashed his and his dad's whole movement down the commode, which is true, incidentally. Bill Crystal destroyed 40 years of labor in three. He's not an unintelligent man. I remember back in the 80s and 90s, he was a very clever observer and somebody I read frequently. Uh, I really looked up his articles because his analysis used to be pretty decent. But Trump derangement system has destroyed his brain.
Well, they're all like that.
God,
Jonah Goldberg. I mean, Jonah Goldberg was somebody I read all the time. He's insane.
Isn't he the one that had the book Intellectual Morons?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean he was funny.
Yeah.
He was funny, and he had enormous amounts of information on his books, with humor, with well written stuff, and now he's a fucking moron.
Well, see, they're propagating the same horse manure as leftists are. That Trump is a Nazi and Trump is an idiot and Trump ruins everything. And objectively speaking, you can see that this isn't happening. I mean, you have Anna Kasparian agreeing that it's not happening, but not Jonah Goldberg or
Yeah.
Crystal. I don't know. I don't get Trump derangement syndrome. I don't get the hatred towards him. I don't know. It's
The only way I get it is fear.
it could be.
We have discussed how political parties in the U.S. are not and have never been homogeneous. To begin with, and there are no national parties in the U.S. There are associations of state parties. And the Republican Party, sometimes with that name, sometimes with other names. In Minnesota, I think the Democratic Party is the Workers' Some Shit Party or another. The Workers and Farmers Party, some crap like that. They're different in every state, and they form a kind of a coalition that sometimes leads to a shitload of infighting and a situation in which some Democrats look more like Republicans in other parts and vice versa. So I understand some differences. I understand, that certain Republicans would look at a conservative candidate in their own party as cans while embracing a blue dog Democrat, for instance. But I think that Trump threatens to destroy that entente cordiale between the social democrats in both parties.
Yeah, and
they fear that. They fear that their game is up. This bullshit about bipartisanship, which is the antithesis of a free political country. If we're all, this is like having the Communist Party as the single authorized party through the back door. We don't have one party, we have two, but we agree on everything. What the fuck is that?
Well, part of it is these people all travel in the same social circles, and someone like Jonah Goldberg is terrified of being made fun of by his peers for supporting someone like Trump, and they have this view of Trump that's it's not connected to reality at all, and they refuse to accept that Trump is a superior being when it comes to making deals and bringing people together and all of that, and they are more at home with. I remember there was a guy I used to go to his website all the time, and then he got deeply into Trump derangement syndrome, but he opposed John McCain being the nominee because he said McCain's goal was to fail with honor, and that was exactly right. McCain had no intention of being president. He wanted to fail with honor, and
Yeah,
he wanted to walk away with his head held high, that sort of thing.
yeah. If
All these,
fuck him for that. By the way,
uh,
intellectual morons was Daniel Flynn.
okay,
Daniel Flynn. This guy had liberal fascism, which came out of, I
okay.
read him at about the same time. Uh, but anyway, fail with honor. What the fuck does that mean? There is no honor in failure.
Well, Americans, I mean, the the establishment Republicans and their sort of peripheral orbiters like Jonah Goldberg, they were all about playing the game and not really getting anything done. Not Trump is all about getting things done, and he's putting the establishment and their orbiters to shame. It's like, okay, Jonah Goldberg and Bill Kristol, you've been in this milieu for decades now, and what do you have to show for it? What exactly are your accomplishments and the accomplishments of the people you support? Um, George Bush was supposed to be a radical departure from the norm, and George was about as establishment as they come.
Yes, indeed.
And the whole notion is to just maintain the status quo. And Trump hates the status quo. When the status quo is dysfunctional, Trump wants to fix it, and that's in his nature. That's how he's always been, and that's why he was able to do things in New York that were thought to be undoable. Everybody would just be standing around staring. How do we fix this? And Trump would come in and say, do this, 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 and that. And they'd be like, oh, he's right. And then along with the gratitude, there's equal resentment, because he's showing up.
Shown to be stupid.
He shows everybody up, and they hate that. And luckily, the establishment Republican is now an endangered species. And within a few more election cycles, there won't be any around left to make a problem. But once the Republicans get used to winning, the Republican voter is going to demand winning. And, they're going to keep the winning sort of Republican in office for a while, I think. Leftists, I mean, as long as they keep putting up candidates, okay, the whole Joe Biden, Kamala Harris situation was a crap show. The way they got rid of Joe Biden and the way they installed Kamala 3 months before the election, this essentially had no hope of succeeding unless she was 30 points ahead in the polls, and she wasn't. Maybe that idiot Iowa pollster thought she was, but she wasn't. Kamala just didn't have the goods. She just couldn't deliver. She couldn't.
She didn't have the knowledge, the ability, or the brains to be anything more than an underpaid secretary in a company town. Period. She is like the Karen Bass. I cannot believe that the mayor of Los Angeles is a Karen. Like Karen Bass, she fell upwards. She started by blowing the mayor and getting appointed to a position, and she fell upwards ever since, having succeeded at none. We have too many of these. The problem with parties becoming nothing more than servers of patronage is that people don't rise because of their merit, they rise because of their friends. And the Peter principle goes out the window. They don't rise until they achieve their level of incompetence. No, they rise past their level of incompetence to heights never justified. We have too many imbeciles, too many cretins. There was a time where our choice was between a good man and a son of a bitch, or a good woman or a bitch. Right now, it seems to be a choice between dumb and dumber. And every now and then comes a Fetterman who I don't like. I still don't fucking like. I still think he is this short from being a full communist.
He's a fraud. He's a fraud. I mean, just the way he dresses is fraudulent.
It's fraudulent. He's a fraud. But he's not an idiot.
No.
So when it comes to certain survival issues, like stopping the spread of terrorism, he doesn't hesitate. He's not like the rest of his fucking party chanting from the river to the sea with Hamas headbands at our universities. He's condemning it in the harshest possible terms because he may be a libtard, but he's not an idiot. There are very few of those on both parties.
Yeah, and we're at the point now where the Democrats resemble the Imperial Japanese near the end of the war. That the Imperial Japanese, there were, I mean, they would have kept on fighting if the Emperor hadn't come out and said it's time to surrender. And the Japanese went into its war against the United States knowing that it was a really stupid thing to do, and that they were banking on the U.S. figuring that it was too much trouble to fight the Japanese. And they were also banking on destroying all the American aircraft carriers at Pearl Harbor. And through sheer luck, the carriers weren't there at the time. But all they did was make Americans want to fight the Japanese. And the war was already lost by the Japanese at the Battle of Midway because they lost all their best pilots, but more importantly, they lost all the crews that armed and serviced the aircraft on the aircraft carriers. And those were people who had years experience, and to replace them, they didn't have enough time. They didn't have the same years. I mean, Japan had been fighting since 1932. And so they were a good 10 years into, they had 10 years experience. And
yes,
they didn't have time to replace all the not only the pilots, but also on an aircraft carrier, you have to be able to refuel and rearm an aircraft as fast as you can. And they didn't have enough time to train up the new crews for the aircraft on the carriers. But they kept on fighting. And the closer we got to the end of the war, the harder they fought. And the reason the atomic bombs were dropped was because we'd taken our heaviest casualties in the Battle of Okinawa. And
yep.
It was calculated that the Allies would take 500,000 casualties in the invasion of Japan, and the Japanese could lose up to 7 million civilians. And so the bombs were dropped, and the total number of casualties was 250,000 instead of 7 million. And even then, there's this comedy of errors where the emperor recorded the surrender message, and it was given to the palace staff, and then these officers attacked the palace and tried to find the recording, and the staff were passing it from room to room right ahead of the pursuing mutinous officers, and they managed to get it to the radio station. And at that point, the officers drove around Tokyo throwing out pamphlets that, you know, the emperor had been forced to give this traitorous surrender notice that it wasn't real, and they should keep fighting. And of course, the next day, the emperor, his recording was played. But I met a Japanese suicide bomber when I was in Japan. I taught him English, and he was supposed to be stationed on a cliff in Okinawa, and he would jump off the cliff and aim for the smokestack of a ship coming in, and go down the smokestack and detonate his bomb and sink the ship. And, you know, I asked him if he would have, and he said, yeah, of course I would have. So the Democrats are at that point. You know, the last Japanese to come out of the jungle was in 2015. 2015.
Yeah, there was one in the early 80s, and I thought that was going to be it. And no, there was one in 2015 in the Philippines, wasn't it?
Yeah. He didn't have a tooth in his head, and he'd wasted his whole life in the jungle. He was like 17 years old, and you know, now he was in his mid 90s or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
And this is what the Democrats are like. It's like they're making, you know, Fetterman is a traitor to the cause. He's not the guy leading the way. And
yeah, the funny thing is that Fetterman is one of the most dangerous collectivists alive in Congress, because he's not being an idiot. He's actually showing the Democrats the way back from oblivion.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll be too stupid to realize it.
Well, they are.
And
they are.
He's not that crazy. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez is dangerous. The more, please put her on TV every day. The more that woman talks, the more the American people are alarmed at what the Democrats have become. The more than Fetterman or what's his name from West Virginia? Manchin, Joe Manchin. The problem with those is that they might convince a greater number of Americans that they are actually an alternative, when in fact, ideologically, they're not that far away from Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar.
The thing is Manchin is old and Fetterman is sick. So, you know, and both of them are shunned by the party. I think the party is going to go through at least a couple more election cycles, maybe more, where they're going to push left as hard as they possibly can.
Oh, yes. And I hope they keep telling themselves that the problem is they didn't go left enough. I hope they come out with a platform of nationalizing resources and banks.
Well, and our houses. Nationalizing our houses.
Yes, because, you know, we cannot exploit our neighbors renting them houses. No.
Well, they're going to announce that it's now time that we all house illegals and homeless people against our will for the greater good.
You know, they're so close. I'm willing to do a bet with anybody in the chat today that California is going to try to build multi-story buildings in Pacific Palisades.
You bet.
They're going to take advantage of this to change zoning And we can't have that place. We cannot waste tax dollars paying people to rebuild and all that just so that we have another an enclave of the rich and famous. Um, we need to spray the riches, and poor people are entitled to nice views too. So we're going to have five-story buildings in Pacific Palisades with homeless and illegals.
Yeah, yeah. We're back to building projects,
Yeah.
because the projects on the East Coast were so successful.
Oh, they still are. Ironically, there was one burning in the Bronx this week as well. It reminded me so much of the 70s and 80s
Yeah.
when half of the fucking Bronx, South Bronx, was constantly aflame. Because, all those bad people who built rental buildings couldn't afford to keep those things anymore, paying taxes and paying fuel and not getting in rent half the money they were spending every month. So they started torching them for the insurance. And it was an epidemic. I mean, there was a point the South Bronx looked like Dresden after the Allied bombing. And then we had a severe housing crisis because, uh, there weren't greedy capitalists building rental buildings. Uh, and the city got involved in the business of uh, low income housing. And those are the projects that became infamous centers of prostitution, criminality, and drugs, and still are. What can I say? They never get it.
Jack Lemmon won an Oscar for a movie he made in the 70s called Save the Tiger. And he was a guy facing a midlife crisis at his business. I think he ran a God, was it I think it was a haberdashery. I can't remember. Oh, one of those wholesale clothing stores or whatever. But he ended up burning it down for the insurance money, and like there was a professional arsonist who would give businessmen his card, and at the time it was so common that
It was. And at the time, I learned by watching the news, I learned techniques for uh, burning a building without leaving one trace. Um, remember the dripping balloons
Mhm.
and others? I learned it watching the news because it was every day. Not only every day, there was another building or two going up in flames. There was another master class on Arson 101 on the TV news. Wasn't that magnificent?
Well, when I had my security gates put up, the guy who built them, he said that everything is a lot less secure now because there are videos on YouTube that people are giving away secrets that in the past only locksmiths and criminals knew.
Yes.
And so you can watch YouTube and learn how to pick a lock.
Oh yeah.
And okay, I don't know. I
And you can buy everything you need on Amazon.
yeah, I'm not worried about people picking my locks, but just the idea that the irresponsibility of the person who puts the video, who makes the video and shows you how to break into houses. I don't know. It's a mindset that I don't get. I know a lot of things that I would never publicize because doing so would make me complicit in whatever happens as a result of it. And I don't want to be complicit in crimes because crimes are not the right thing to do. It's not right to break the law. And, you know, a lot of us break the law in little ways, laws that are you know, basically inconsequential. Like, for example, when you come to a stop sign, you're supposed to come to a stop, and legally here in California, your car is supposed to, you stop, and then it's supposed to slightly fall back, and that means you're at a full stop. A full stop doesn't mean you stop and stop moving. A full stop means the car slightly falls back. So I got a ticket once. I stopped at a four-way intersection, and then suddenly a cop came out of his hiding spot and ticketed me, and it was for the city quota. And I said I did stop. He said, no, your car didn't fall backwards slightly. Well, he was too far away to see whether my car did that or not. He just had to give me a ticket because he was told, listen, buddy, your quota isn't filled. So he had to go out and ticket people. And if I could have gotten out of that ticket in an illegal way, I probably would have, if I was guaranteed not to be caught. But as I had to go to traffic school, and if you've ever been to traffic school, it's 8 hours of torture for everybody, including the instructor.
But with the 1950s film.
Yeah. In this one, they had a film. It's this famous film of some German guy crashing a Mercedes at top speed, and there's cameras in the car, and you see him. He's crashing it into another car at like 120 miles an hour. And, you see his head whiplashing and everything. And the what's the phrase? Urban legend is that this was a condemned criminal in Germany. He was condemned to death, and they gave him the opportunity to make this video. Well, there's no death penalty in Germany. There hasn't been a death penalty. The longest prison sentence for anything is 20 years. So he wasn't a condemned criminal. But, people got to make up their stories.
Oh, they have to. Speaking of making up stories, Debbie's putting something in the chat there that she read someplace that 50% of the fires are set by homeless, mostly accidental, but who knows? It wouldn't surprise me in the least. I've seen homeless encampments, and they light fires to keep their asses warm. They do so right next. There was one such encampment right next to Topanga Park. It wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me at all if there weren't several assholes. They actually caught one with a torch. Some people said a flamethrower, but that's because they don't know what a flamethrower is. He had a torch, like a plumber's torch. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Remember in San Francisco, that wave of fires, and they were all ultimately caused by ecologists who wanted to teach the state a lesson on what would happen if everything went up in smoke.
Well, they just caught a second arsonist, and she's a 60-year-old female career criminal from Philadelphia.
Mm.
So
why isn't she burning shit in Philadelphia?
She saw the news and she wanted to get in on the action. And
holy crap!
But she's got warrants all over the country. And so what better way to go under the radar than to become an arsonist during this period?
Yeah. Remember yesterday we were talking about copycats and how whether the first one was started by an arsonist or not, we were going to have arsonists thinking it's the season. I don't know. The first fire, I remember the very first videos I saw. It was a small fire in a backyard right next to Topanga Canyon. And it occurs to me that's the beginning. We're going to find out eventually for sure. But it looks to me like that was the beginning of this fire in Pacific Palisades. And it had all the appearance of having started in a barbecue.
Yeah, it's possible. The early videos I saw showed gigantic flames roaring up out of the ravine and catching the pile of the 3 foot thick pile of brush that
Oh,
lined
yeah.
the ravine in the backyards of all these houses. And it was funny. People were saying those are 20-foot flames. Those were 100-foot flames.
Yeah.
In some cases, they were 300-foot flames. You know,
Because they
people,
came from the bottom of that ravine over there.
and the ravines hadn't been cleared of dried brush in decades.
I
Um,
can guarantee you, not since 1980.
yeah,
Because I remember the discussions in the early 80s uh, when I spent some time there. And it was, we shouldn't interfere with nature, my friend.
well,
Man is a bad thing if we want to combat. They weren't talking about climate change there, but they were talking about conservation, and we needed to preserve nature and species. And by taking the underbrush, we were destroying the habitat of this or that. And idiots like the Sierra Club and the Wild Fund, the Wild something Fund,
life
were
fun.
the Wildlife Fund. They were constantly, and back then they had it with the spotted owl, and there was a caterpillar they wanted to protect. And then of course it switched to climate change, but it was always the same shit. And in the meantime, this thing kept piling up. I'm pretty damn sure that if somebody farted near Topanga Park, near Topanga State Park, something would have lit.
Well, I mean, we're interfering with nature by simply being here. So,
Well,
unless we're living out in the open, just lying down in the grass every night, we're interfering with nature by
oh, you still are. On the other hand, I'm of the opinion that we are part of nature,
we are,
and so
but
is everything, and so is everything we do.
well, I mean, you can't really make the argument that high-rise apartment buildings are of nature. They're of humans. And
To me, they're no different than very, very tall termite mounds.
well, okay, but
We are nature.
yeah, okay, but the argument that we have to that we can't clear brush because it's interfering with nature. It's picking and choosing
Yeah.
what's interfering with nature. Interfering with nature. Um, our all our airliners are interfering with nature. It's a ridiculous argument, and if the voters continue to support this ridiculous argument, then they just deserve what they just got, and they'll deserve what they get in the future.
Some stupid scribe was complaining in Twitter that uh, Karen Bass is such an incompetent, useless woman. She has no place in the government of the city. And I beg to differ. 52, 53% of the people of LA put it there. That's her business there. It's not her fault. It's the voters' fault. It's the
Yeah, I mean,
people who keep voting for Newsom. It's the people who keep voting for all of these assholes everywhere as they turn their once lovely state into a mound of shit.
their records were out there for everybody to see, and people voted for them anyway, so they got what they asked for. They got what they wanted, and now they're unhappy. But you know,
Nobody can claim to be surprised.
yeah, I mean they claim they were surprised, but I mean the notion that Gavin Newsom was ever going to be a good governor or that Karen Bass was going to be a good mayor, I mean it's absurd. Their records show that they don't have it in them, but
No,
people voted for them out of defiance because right wingers were saying these people shouldn't be voted for. Leftist voters had a Pavlovian response and voted for them, and then turned to the Republicans and said, "Hey, what do you think of that?" And it's like, well,
and by the way, we're talking about these guys. Blessedly for them, out of the limelight are the City Council of Los Angeles. Oh my God! The City Council meetings should be televised in full on primetime television. People need to see what kind of imbeciles are raiding the treasury and destroying their future.
well, there was one named Mark Ridley Thomas who was an open crook for decades, and he was finally caught. And he started waving a Bible and shrieking about racism and everything. But he got elected and reelected and reelected and reelected,
Yeah,
and his thievery was out there in the open for everybody to see. He spent
yeah.
$3 million decorating his office.
Holy fuck!
He wasn't authorized to use that money, but he did.
And that's probably not a record. That's probably not even a record.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's the Californian voter votes with their eyes wide open, and then they bitch about the consequences, and then they vote for the same thing all over again or worse. So
Yeah.
you just have to tune them out and say, okay, you're all sad now. I get it. Goodbye now. Bye bye.
Yep. Somebody's asking, will California continue to destroy dams for the environment and for indigenous peoples? Yes, most definitely. While these people are in charge, they will continue to do that because it's all about virtue signaling. Now, if you want to restore salmon populations in rivers, you don't need to destroy a dam. We have new dams are built with bypasses for salmon. There are salmon cannons for old dams, and they work marvelously. So there is no rationale to destroy dams except to fuck up agriculture, to destroy gardens. The people who settled California after 1848 turned a crappy desert into a garden. They made it not the breadbasket of America, but the vegetable, fruit, and nut basket of America. Through clever engineering and work, they created a system of reservoirs and irrigation channels that changed the look of the desert into a garden, literally. They had water during the drought seasons because they saved enough water during the rainy seasons and the melting snows. And now, in less than 30 years, these idiots have destroyed it to the point that they're turning California into an uninhabitable desert again. Good luck. You voted for that. Enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, none of this is a secret, but you think
Yeah.
you think any of these actors actually? I mean, they don't know anything about anything.
No. The only reason they're there is because they can sometimes memorize a couple of lines and repeat them with an expression, and sometimes open their legs in the right sofa. Because you and I know that half the actors and actresses that are there are not there for any kind of craft or art. They're there because they fucked their way there. And, you know, what do they have to say that I would care to listen? And I'm talking about left and right wing because they're equally stupid, with very few exceptions. John Voight is one such exception. James Woods is one such exception. Ronald Reagan definitely was one such exception. But we're talking about maybe a dozen people out of thousands. Your friend, I hope you don't miss her much, who lost her house in the Malibu fire in 2018, Alisa Milano. That stupid cow. Do you think she learned anything with her house going up in smoke?
No.
I love it because people say, well, now that their houses are burned, they're going to turn on. First of all, we're talking about maybe 30,000 people affected in this very rich environment. They don't change elections, baby. Even if all of them magically turned against the Democrats, there aren't enough of them. Those who are getting the free health care, those who are getting the freebies and the state assistance, those will vote Democrat, even if the whole fucking state is torched. And actors and actresses are going to continue virtue signaling until the end of the fucking world, like any Alisa Milano. Their house burns, it must be Trump's fault. I told you, you son of a bitch, I told you climate change was a problem, and you didn't believe me, and now my house is gone. They're not going to change. They're not going to change. What happened to all that rain that fell in California in the last 2 years? All that rain and snow went into the ocean because we are protecting tribal lands. The deltas melt, and we certainly don't want Californians to think there is water there. So it was all it emptied into the ocean. It's the most ridiculous thing on the planet, but that's exactly what they did. So.
Yeah, Newsom is proud of it. He made a video about how much water he dumped back in the ocean. So,
yeah. And she bragged about the rivers returning to their oh, I'm having a little bit of a problem there, to their course after destroying the dams. And now the salmon are coming back as if they weren't there with the dam, and celebrating that now. What is it? 18 real Indians left in California, because the rest are like Marlon Brando's Oscar Indian.
Well, you qualify as a Native American if you're 132nd. So 132nd, that's what? How many
You know, for
grandfathers
most
ago?
tribes, yeah, for most tribes is 1/16th. I don't qualify for either because I'm 1/1000th. Um, what about the rising ocean levels? I'll tell you this. In the city in Valencia, in Spain, there are the ruins of a fish farm built by the Romans 2,000 years ago. It's a fish farm, pools built in the ocean with stone and water resistant cement that the Romans used to breed fish. People think that is a new thing. It's been going on for 2,000 years. These pools, essentially, you fill a pool with seawater, you put the eggs, fish grow. As fish grow, you move them onto the next pool, and then the next pool, and then you take them out and sell them in the market. Those pools have marks for the level of the ocean so that you can control, more water, less water, but you have marks with the ocean level as it stood 2,000 years ago. Tomorrow, you could put them in production again, and the ocean level has not changed. This is one of the best ways we have to measure up the ocean level. Actual pools built by the Roman with the level marked on them, where we can see the ocean level is at the same point it was 2,000 years ago. So they can take the rising of the oceans or lowering of the oceans and shove it where the sun don't shine. And the only reason we don't have half of Florida underwater now is because we built channels, we've dried the swamps, we built dikes, we limited the course of the river of grass. Okeechobee Lake exists so that South Florida is not a ginormous fucking swamp. And if you want to return nature to its course, you have to destroy the dikes closing Okeechobee Lake on the south. All that water is going to come all the way up to fucking Miami, and this will revert to alligator land. And it has nothing to do with sea levels. And it's not the same thing to build a dike to uh, tame the waters than put one in the fire department. Not the same thing. Oh God, I hope I don't share an ancestor with her. Okay. So anyway, Thomas, I already made my plea, but I'll do it again because nobody's sending a dime tonight. Please remember to drop a buck or two. I usually castigate you with signs. Today I haven't, but apparently out of sight, out of mind. Please support this program if you like it, and that'll help us continue. And you know how to do it already. If I have to repeat myself, I'll probably puke. So that's it. Um, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 10:30 p.m. Quad meet, where people can come in on the screen and we can have an open conversation. And Tuesday night at the VIP room for channel members only. Our way of saying thank you to the people who get a monthly membership and support us. And that said, Thomas, do you have a last word for us?
I do. Bleb, B-L-E-B, bleb.
Bleb. Oh, yes, I like that one. It's not gleb, it's bleb.
Bleb.
By the way, the last one was absolutely on the nose. I don't know if people remember, but they can probably go in SQV and find it. And with that, thank you very much, folks, and see you tomorrow. And you, Thomas, I'll see you next week. Please try to survive the general state of idiocy in your godforsaken state. Good night.